Welcome back to Unsealed 4x4. We're here for a 5,000 kilometer update on the Predator New Mutant XAT we've got fitted up to my Ranger. Now, if you haven't read the initial thoughts article on the website, these are a 35 by 12.5 R17 aggressive all-terrain tire, and they stick pretty far outside of the Ranger because they're wrapped around 17 by 9 ROH Zulu beadlock wheels. They punch in at a 0 offset if you're looking to get a similar spec on your Ranger. Now, if you haven't heard the name Predator before, it's because they're reasonably new on Australian shores, but not reasonably new in the tyre business. They're actually the tyre arm of ROH Wheels, a trusted Aussie name that's been making four-wheel drive wheels for literally decades. So they've got a pretty good understanding of what us as four-wheel drivers actually want out here in the bush. Now, they do two different tyres. Predator is the brand, New Mutant is the range, and we've got the XAT on mine, the aggressive all-terrain. They also do an XMT, which is a little bit more aggressive if you are looking for that. For me though, the XAT was the pick. It's a tire designed to be perfect daily driver, good on the road and off the road, fantastic for beach work, and a much more comfortable ride than a lot of different tires on the market. So, after 5,000 kilometers, how are they holding up? What do I like? What am I not sold on? Let's find out. Okay, this might seem a little bit counterintuitive for a four-wheel drive tire review, but the first thing I want to talk to you about is actually on-road performance, mainly because that's where all four-wheel drive tires normally fall apart. They're great in the bush and they're terrible literally every other day of the week. I've been genuinely impressed with these, especially in the wet. I've had the unique opportunity to put these head-to-head against another brand tire in the wet, and it is actually comical how tail happy the other car is on a different brand compared to how compliant this one is. I think a large part of that are these sipes. I get a little bit of this Blue Mountain sandstone off, and you can see how aggressive the sipes are all throughout this. So the whole tire is just constantly pushing water out through all of these deep channels. And it is something that you actually really notice. A lot of four-wheel drives, you know, my old 80 series, it was on a different brand, would get super squirrely in the wet. This is unbelievably stable, unbelievably predictable. Even when I'm trying to be a rat bag, it just doesn't want to do it. So as far as all-terrains go, these sipes really make a big difference. The last thing that I'll ask you about on-road performance is actually how these are holding up, just in terms of the longevity and tread depth side of things. So you can see initially in the first couple of thousand Ks, you're gonna get a lot of compression of the rubber, and it's gonna look like they've really lost a lot of their tread depth. These are still hanging on super fantastic. You can see just how deep that is. There's nearly 10 mil of tread still there. One thing that I have noticed, depending on where you rub along the face of it, there is a little bit of cupping that I'm getting. I think that's on me though. I haven't actually got a wheel alignment on this since putting the lift in, so that's really an indication of how important that is just to make any tires last, but it's just interesting sort of seeing it there. The other thing on that front is just the actual road noise. Now, my initial thoughts, I said how unbelievably quiet these are, and I actually compared them to putting a roof rack on. I've got another Ranger on 33s, all-terrains, and a bit of bar work, and it's actually significantly louder than this, even though this has got a lot bigger tires. So as far as an everyday driver goes, these are a winner so far. Now, that's all great stuff, Dan, but people aren't buying four-wheel drive tires for the commute to work. They're buying them for this stuff, for four-wheel driving. And I'd kind of categorize that into two distinct sections. There's fast-flowing fire trails, which are what you're gonna find in the outback when you head up to Cape York, most of you touring. And then there's this stuff, the actual hardcore wheel lifting type of stuff. Now, what I've found in the fast-flowing fire trails is a lot like the on-road performance, that the tire just gives an unbelievably planted ride. And I think it's because of that X pattern in the tread. So if I come in heavy into a corner, maybe I'm carrying a little bit too much speed, there's never any understeer. I don't find the car wants to push out. It pretty much bites and hooks in to the limits of the car anyway. I'm running some pretty expensive suspension, and neither the tire or the suspension seems to be the weak link there, so that's seriously impressive. You notice that with the torque as well. All these modern dual cabs are pushing out insane amounts of torque. 500 Newton meter stock from the Ranger with the small engine. That's power figures just unheard of back in the day. And even then, you give it a boot full and the traction control never kicks in, even in this real slippery Blue Mountain sandstone stuff that I call home. Now, out here in the ruts, things do get a little bit different though. Obviously, as an all-terrain tire, it's not gonna have those biting tread blocks that you're gonna get on the XMT, for example. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. See, the XMT is a 3-ply, whereas the XAT is a 2-ply. That means the sidewalls are a little bit more supple. It means I can drop the same pressure out to, say if I'm dropping down to 18 PSI in this kind of terrain, I'm gonna get a longer footprint out of this than I will out of a stiffer tire, even though people think it's tougher. I have paired those 35s with bead locks as well, so in this kind of terrain, if I do find that I'm struggling for traction, I normally just drop an extra PSI out or two, and that's pretty much all it needs. Obviously, if you're deep in the high country, you're spinning wheels in the Warburton mud, or you live up in far north Queensland where you're just in that thick clay all the time, you probably want something more aggressive than this, but for anything on the sandstone escarpments over here on the East Coast, I reckon they are more than enough tire off-road. Now that 2 versus 3 ply thing is something that I find very interesting. A lot of people look at it and they go, oh, I've got a big tough 4-wheel drive, it has to be 3 ply, but it can be a negative. Sure, if you're doing thousands of Ks of outback gibberstones, you're driving in sharp shale, it's gonna cut sidewalls, you're towing extremely heavy loads, then you might want that. But all of that strength in the carcass is actually a negative if you're doing fast flowing fire trails, if you're doing sand driving. If you live in Southeast Queensland and you spend all of your time on the sand islands, you want a 2 ply. It's not a lesser option, it's literally the better option for your needs. So for me with the all-terrain, I actually want that 2 ply. A 3 ply would make these a worse tire. So something to keep in mind about what you actually do, not just what looks good on a spec sheet. So if you haven't figured it out yet, after 5,000 Ks, I'm still just as impressed with these as I was when I put them on. And it really does make sense. They're one of the most affordable tires on the market. They're one of the best I've ever had for road noise. They are fantastic actually on the road, which is where people spend at least 5 out of 7 days normally. And then out here in the rough stuff, they can still hold their own. I've had a lot of different tires over the years, some very comparable, better in certain areas. I've had others that have got more recognizable names on them that have been horrendous. So the fact that there's a tire that I'd never even heard of a few months ago is now up there with one of my favorites of all time is really quite impressive. But 5,000 Ks is still just a drop in the ocean for these. I'd really like to get at least 10 times that amount of Ks out of them still. So I think I'm gonna have to do another article on the website, maybe in another year or two, and see how these have really stood up to the test of time. So far though, I reckon they're probably gonna do pretty good. But what do you think? Have you got any questions about the tires? Would you like to see them tested in a specific terrain? Maybe something that suits the kind of wheeling that you do? Let me know in the comments below and I'll see if I can talk the boss into giving me the company credit card so I can put a few more Ks on them.